Hey everyone, welcome to Just Win with Wanda, a podcast designed to highlight people and their game winning passions. So, hi everyone. Thank you again for joining in and just being here for another episode of Just Win with Wanda. I have a very special guest. I know I say all of my guests are special, but this individual is truly, truly special. So today I have the pleasure of interviewing and connecting with Dr. Jethro Ekuta, who is an accomplished regulatory affairs and drug safety executive. He is currently at Alexion Pharmaceuticals and holds the role as Vice President of Global Regulatory Affairs. So I'm so excited about this conversation to dive into his career trajectory. So welcome, Dr. Ekuta, to Just Win with Wanda.
Thank you very much, Wanda. I appreciate the kind and gracious introduction.
You are beyond welcome. And before we get into the questions, I just wanted to, kind of share how I met you. I had the privilege of becoming a fellow through Rutgers University, and they had an affiliation with Johnson and Johnson within the consumer sector. And during my interview, Dr. Ekuta was one of the individuals that I honestly just connected with really well, based on his background and his story coming from Nigeria. It's something that resonated with me. And honestly, it was what sold me in terms of that particular fellowship. So it's really nice to still have a mentoring relationship with you, Dr. Ekuta, and have you here to share some gems with my audience.
Thank you again, Wanda. It's my honor and privilege to be part of this today.
Yeah. So take me back to, when you were in Nigeria, how was your upbringing and at what point did you realize you wanted to get into the science field?
Yeah, no, thank you, Wanda. So when I was in Nigeria, I actually grew up in a small village, and there was an elementary school in that village. So I was one of the lucky few that got a chance of attending an elementary school that was just a couple steps away from your house. And then there was a government, this was a government secondary school, which was a boarding school, some 15 miles away from my village. And one of the top government schools in the area. So I was privileged to attend that boarding school. And of course, at the time, you had to, after your third year, you had to make a choice between uh, pursuing classes in the arts or in the sciences. So I chose to go down the path of the sciences. And one day there was a veterinary surgeon who came to do a career day conversation with at my school, and I got very much interested. Wanted to become a veterinary surgeon, and I did in fact go to the university to train as a veterinary surgeon. But during my second year in the university, when I took pharmacology as the class, I fell in love with it. And from that point on, I wanted to be involved in developing new medicines. And that was the track that took me to eventually come to the US to earn my PhD in pharmacology, and subsequently went on to all the places that I've been at, which I can comment on as we go along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very unique journey. I know when we first met, I was just amazed that you had a veterinarian background. You don't hear that often, when you're connecting with individuals within pharma. So that definitely, helps you stand out. So when you made that transition from Nigeria to the US, how was that experience in university during that time when I believe you went to the University of Mississippi, right?
Yes, that is correct. So before I came to the US, after my graduation from college, of course, for those from Nigeria, you have to complete a 1 year National Youth Service Corps. So
Mhm.
following that, I went back to my alma mater and became an assistant professor in pharmacology and physiology. So I taught students that for a couple years, and then there was an institute called the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development in Nigeria, based in Abuja, the federal capital. At the time, Nigeria was interested in developing drugs from natural products such as medicinal plants, because as most people know, in Nigeria, there is still a lot of practice of traditional medicine. And most of the time, parents pass the art to their children. So we wanted to collect as much information as we could from the practitioners around the Federal Capital Territory. So I was responsible for leading that project, actually collecting samples of medicinal plants. And then it turned out that the University of Mississippi had a similar program where they were doing a lot of research at the School of Pharmacy into medicinal plants. So through that collaboration, I came to the US to attend the University of Mississippi because I got funding from that institute in Mississippi. And when I arrived, the folks in Mississippi were very nice. Of course, I had heard a lot about the history of Mississippi, and folks were always asking. In fact, to this day, when I introduced myself and said I went to the University of Mississippi, everyone, black, white, whatever, they will, their first reaction is, it's like, what? You went to Mississippi? I said, yes, I did. But you know what? The folks there were extremely nice to me. My professors were truly, very, very good, and they were very supportive. So I was able to go through my program in a record 4 years. In fact, when I attended the school, there were colleagues who, had been there, finishing their program in 7 to 8 years. And for me, finishing up in 4 years was, quite remarkable at the time. So yeah, folks were nice, and that was how I completed my program and went on to do postdoctoral training in cardiovascular and neuropharmacology at Meharry Medical College. I was fortunate at the time because when I was at Meharry Medical College, there was this program that the US Congress had provided appropriations for. That means they provided budget, to train more people in clinical pharmacology, because at the time there was quite, a huge shortage at the FDA. So but you were always given the option of completing the program and staying on or moving on. So for me, having that privilege was quite remarkable, because to this day, it never leaves you. If you've been at the FDA, you constantly think like an FDA reviewer, which has always helped me in looking at issues in industry. So yeah, that was how I was, fortunate to be part of the cohort that trained. And then after my training, I'm somebody who enjoys the intellectual stimulation that comes from thinking through a problem, as opposed to taking a problem someone else has solved and then trying to, just vet and see if they did it right, which most of the time I feel that's what the reviewers do. They are looking at what somebody else has done and trying to confirm if it was done right, if it was done consistent with the regulations, and if they can rely on the conclusions drawn by the company. So I wanted to be on the side that actually thought through, how do we get from point A to point B? Because that's where I felt the intellectual stimulation resided. So that's how I went there, and then made the decision that going to industry was going to be a better choice for me.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question was,
Yeah.
What prompted you to make that career switch? Because as we know, there are individuals who are lifelong
Yep.
FDA reviewers.
Absolutely.
So can you kind of speak a little bit more about that decision and what went
Yes.
into making that choice?
Yeah. So, like I said, when I was at the FDA, I got the privilege of attending so many different meetings with sponsors, preparing for those meetings from the FDA side, and just, thinking through the issues. And what was interesting was, that you could have two companies coming in the same day or separated by 1 week, who are working on the same type of program or within the same therapeutic area. And, at the FDA, you have the line of sight to what all the companies are doing. but the companies themselves will not have that line of sight. And so when you give an advice to one company to do something one way, and then the next company representatives come in and they argue that it's not something that can be done, you can't really tell them, well, we just told somebody else that this can be done, so we know it can be done. So, but that was quite an interesting, scenario to have. But like I said, what really was the tipping point for me was I really wanted to have the opportunity of really thinking through a program, a drug development program. It could be for a disease for which there is no current treatment, or just trying to figure out, like a piece of a puzzle to say, okay, how do we bring things together? How many patients are we going to need to treat? What type of approach do we need to use? And for how long do we need to treat? How do we interpret the results and package all that and interact with the FDA? Those were the pieces that I found very exciting. And during my initial, when I was present at the FDA and engaged in some of those conversations, I just felt, oh, I think I would really enjoy this if I were on the other side coming to talk to the agency. And having gained that knowledge of how the agency thinks about things, I felt it was something that better equipped me to be able to do that well on the industry side. So then when the opportunity came, there was actually a program that Procter & Gamble hosted at the time where they were looking for minority scholars who could join the company. And, they made you to have a conversation with different hiring managers. And one of the folks I met was the regulatory affairs head. And through the conversation, she was interested in bringing me on board to join the company. And that was how I began my industry career in regulatory affairs.
Yep. So it started at Procter and Gamble, and then you went to Wyeth and then BMS. A lot of different experiences at different companies.
Yeah.
But one of my questions that I have for you is, in addition to the ability to think critically, what additional skills did you acquire from your time at FDA that helped you, as you transitioned into pharma?
Yep. So I think, one of the key takeaways from the FDA is really their passion for the work that they do. FDA people take a lot of pride in what they do. They know that the work they do is extremely important for public health, so they take it very seriously. And then in that environment, it was not a competitive environment where one person was trying to outdo the next person, but it was a matter of them working together for the common good of humanity. And so, I can't think of any place beyond the FDA where you have that deep sense of purpose, knowing that the decisions you make on a daily basis will have a huge impact, not just on a few people, not just on people in America, but really across the world. And so that sense of purpose was something that I cherished and admired. And in any type of place that I'm at, I always ask myself, what is the purpose, for which I'm here? What am I supposed to contribute? How am I supposed to make the world a better place? So that was something I took away from there. And the fact that it equipped me to understand the way they think, which is typically, their primary focus is public health, the protection of public health. And so in almost all decisions they make, that is always at the forefront of their decision making. Sometimes in industry, it's a question of, okay, how can we get from point A to point B very quickly so that we can get, this to patients, and also so that we can return some value back to shareholders. The FDA doesn't necessarily think of, the shareholder component of it. Of course, they are conscious of it, but it's always what is in the best interest of the patients that we serve. So I also, tend to have that sense of purpose because, like I said earlier, I typically will constantly think like I was still at the FDA. And so, I'm thinking about, okay, how can this better serve patients? And then one, final thing was I was fortunate because the person who was my boss at the FDA became highly instrumental in my career progression. Like you mentioned, I worked for many different companies, but the one common thread across most of those companies is this one individual. When I was at the FDA, he took a lot of interest in me, essentially made himself to be a mentor to me. I had not asked him to do so, but he took, a personal interest in doing so. So when I left Procter and Gamble, it was really to work with him at Pfizer because about the time that I left the FDA and went to P&G, he had left and gone to Pfizer. So he, encouraged me to come and join him. I worked with him. And when I left Pfizer and went to Wyatt, he left Pfizer and went to Bristol Myers Squibb. And of course, you know where this story is going. A couple years later, I was back with him working at Bristol Myers Squibb. It turned out, you know, when we both left, he went back to Pfizer, I went to Genzyme, and eventually I came to J&J. He ended up coming to J&J, Johnson and Johnson, and that was when I actually told him, well, all these years I have followed you around, but this time around you followed me because I came to J&J before you. So yeah, so it was good that, when you get that type of opportunity to have someone who is willing to mentor you, you should absolutely take advantage of that because that has been a tremendous help to me in industry.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I can attest to the fact that, when we had the honor of working together, you were the vice president of regulatory affairs within the consumer sector. You definitely always emphasized the importance of public health and would always, go back to the impact that it may have on patients or the consumers in that case. So I wanted to kind of highlight your career overall.
Yep.
You've had a lot of different experiences, but what excites you about regulatory affairs?
Hmm. Well, so I have had different careers, but I will say that the one that I've truly enjoyed the most is regulatory affairs. And the reason for that is because you are constantly challenged with new things. It could be a new regulation that a regulatory agency has issued, and you need to understand it because colleagues that you work with, you are in regulatory, they expect you to be able to understand what the new guideline or regulation means for the company and how it affects them or not affect them. So it forces you to always be a lifelong learner because you constantly have to know, because these other people can also read the regulations themselves. But at the end of the day, as the regulatory professional, you need to be the one that needs to bring the right perspective to that regulation or guideline. So it allows me to learn. It's also done in my life that I don't get bored doing, because if I have to do something that is repetitive, doing the same thing over and over and over, I quickly get bored. I like to be challenged with different things. I mean, you've been in regulatory, and you can go to the office one day with your plan mapped out. You get there, well, your entire plan could change, at a moment's notice because maybe one of your drugs caused a safety issue somewhere, and now you have to inform the regulators, and it just changes your day. So that constant challenge of not knowing what a day may look like, I really love that. The fact that there are many different things I can be working on at the same time. I can sit with a project team discussing a project in one moment, and in another moment I'm on the phone talking to a regulator. I just love that variety and the tremendous opportunities to constantly learn. And also, in terms of problem solving, a lot of the things that we deal with in regulatory affairs are not set out in black and white. You usually have shades of gray. And in that shades of gray zone, it means that you can't necessarily just take a hardline position that something can only be done one way. Like they say, there are many ways to skin a cat. You could have three different ways of doing something. And what I find most valuable in regulatory affairs is not necessarily telling people there is only one way to do something, but being able to figure out those different ways that the same thing can be accomplished, but being able to put in front of them what the pros and cons are for each of the options, because what it boils down to is the level of risk tolerance that a company may be willing to take. It's not a matter of right or wrong. As long as it's not anything that borders on ethical, you don't want to do anything unethical. But outside of that, you can approach something from different perspectives, but the value where regulatory brings value is in being able to let people know that if you take approach A, this is what that will get you. These are the risks you will have to take. This is what the impact might be, whether on your timeline, on resources, or the likelihood of getting something approved by the FDA versus option B or option C. So being able to do that, I think it puts you in a position where you are seen as a leader almost all the time. So regardless of what one's level may be in regulatory affairs, you are always a leader because you are helping other people to see something that you might have seen, and to galvanize them to see what you are seeing and come along with you. To me, that's what a leader does. And it is for these reasons that I really enjoy regulatory affairs.
Hmm. And that reminds me of a quote that one of the leaders at J&J would always say was, "You can lead from any seat," and that
Exactly.
definitely holds true within regulatory affairs.
Yep.
So just taking a quick pivot to your current position within Alexion, and honestly, in your prior positions where you were a vice president, could you talk about your overall experience as a pharma executive, and particularly a Black pharma executive? How has that been? And, what are some pros that you've experienced? And if you don't mind sharing, what are some potential challenges that you've experienced as well?
Sure. No, thank you. So, being a Black executive means that most of the time you are going to be a minority. I will sit in meetings, especially in my earlier days when I was still relatively young in my profession. When I attend a large meeting, it will not be unusual to look around and see that I'm the only one that looks a little bit different from everyone else. Those days have changed now because now we have a lot more people that have entered into the profession, which is a good thing. But you find yourself sort of being, a minority. You're already a minority because you're Black, but you'll be a minority, because there are not too many people like you who may be at that level. So you find yourself in the midst of, these other people that are more the majority, and that can be intimidating sometimes. But I usually take solace in the fact that, look, I just didn't get here by accident. I just didn't get here just by chance. There were things I have, done along the way that paved the way for me to be here. So I have something to offer. And so instead of feeling intimidated or, feeling afraid, I will just try to speak up. If I have, naturally I'm a quiet person, but when I'm in those settings and I know that I have something of value to share, I will share them because I feel what I have to share is important. I feel it's going to, impact somebody somewhere, someday. So there's no point for me to keep it in. And that then motivates me and propels me to be able to share that. But the advantage you get to is because there are not too many such people. It just means that you have a lot more opportunities that are available to you as well. Because if they are looking for, people who are minorities to be in certain positions, it just puts you in a better situation, because the competition will be much less. But of course, our goal is to have more people, many more minorities, many more Black people who can assume these roles, because by having many more of, people like us, we can then help others to grow. We can mentor others. And mentoring is something that I personally take very seriously. I love to do it. So seeing others rise, to where we are, because they are the next generation of folks. I think that's something that all of us should be doing. So yes, it does offer tremendous opportunities. And of course, some of those challenges are what I said earlier, is that anytime you find yourself being a minority, there's always a tendency to hide and just not be known. You can just fizzle in the crowd so that nobody really notices you. But that's not something we want to be doing. We should really be standing out and showcasing what we have, contributing where we are called upon to do so, and making a difference in the world around us. So I usually see it more as an opportunity than a challenge at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, just observing you, you're such a role model when it comes to true leadership. Um, you speak your mind and you always have something of value to add to the conversation. And that's amazing. I think, like you mentioned, when we have those opportunities to be in the room or to have a seat at the table, it's imperative for us to take up space and not feel as though it was just an accident for us to be there, but that we're there because of our experiences, because we are qualified, and for us to use that position to make a difference. So thank you for everything that you're doing and have done. It's again an honor to just be a part of your career and to learn from you.
Thank you, Wanda. It's my privilege as well, knowing someone like yourself whom I would call a pace setter, trying to make a difference in the world. And I think all of us have been called in one way or another to do that. I always see that, whatever opportunities we have or whatever positions we occupy, I usually see the greater good in that, which is this is a privilege for a set period of time to make a difference in somebody else's life. So it's usually not about us per se. It's always about how can I use the influence that my position affords me to be able to make somebody else's life better, either through mentoring them or through creating opportunities for them to get hired into a role or whatever it is. It's always a privilege. And I think if all of us can see it from that perspective, it can make a huge difference in society and, lift others up so that, they too can have the opportunities that we have had.
Absolutely. And that's perfect segue to my final question is,
Yep.
how would you recommend that people optimize mentoring relationships? I know you spoke about your relationship with the former manager at
Yeah.
FDA, and you guys kind of followed each other somewhat.
Mhm.
Can you speak a little bit about how those that are looking for mentors, those
Yeah.
that currently have mentors, how can they make the most out of that relationship?
Yep. Yeah, mentoring, comes in different ways. In my own case, like I explained earlier, it was somebody who took notice of me and on their own accord chose they were going to get close to me and help me along the way. Many times that's not the way that it works. Sometimes it could come from the individual who wants to be mentored, reaching out to someone they consider as a role model to then mentor them. I think, in the situation between you and I, because we had that program for fellowship, which you came through, and of course, I saw the potential in you and felt, oh, this is, somebody that we absolutely must do everything possible to get into this program. You already had distinguished yourself academically, you stood out. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm just advocating for this person because they are Black or because they are a fellow Nigerian, but because I know this person is qualified, this person's credential speaks for itself, and the only thing they need is someone to support them and help them to get to the next level. So, so in that situation, I mean, for me, I sometimes actively, just leave the door open to people when we have an interaction and we have a conversation. I will just simply tell them, look, if you want to connect with me further, or if you have a need you think I will be in a position to support you with, just reach out. So by leaving that door open, it invites people in, because sometimes people may want to do something, but they may be afraid that, oh well, I don't know, if this person's schedule would allow, I don't know if this person will even consider doing this for me. But when, as a leader, you leave that door open, I think it encourages people to walk through the door. So through that, I have had the privilege of mentoring a lot of people. But what I think we can do as individuals is, in any type of situation that we find ourselves in, look at it as an opportunity for networking. It could be a meeting you attended, maybe an external meeting you attended, could be a professional meeting you attended. You are going to run into people. Sometimes it's the speaker, the person who spoke in that session. You really like the way they communicated the information. You have a lot of things in common with that person, and you want to get to know them more. Then take the active step of introducing yourself to them, to say, this is who I am. I really enjoyed your presentation. I would like an opportunity to follow up with you and learn more from you. And then you'll be pleasantly surprised that people are usually, a lot of leaders are typically open and willing to do something like that. So don't be afraid to step out and do that on your own. But if somebody reaches out to you of their own free will, also take it as, a sign of a good gesture, that this person has something about me that they believe in and they are willing to invest in my future. So I'm also going to reciprocate that and make sure that I'm, a good mentee by listening to them, by taking their advice. And when I have questions, I'm able to ask and run things by them. And then eventually, sometimes mentors become sponsors. And there's a difference between a mentor and a sponsor. In the case of a sponsor, this is someone that, actively advocates for you where you are not present. Most of the time, it's somebody who is in a position where they can make decisions or where they can influence decisions. So if they want to give, a project to someone, for example, in the group, your sponsor will be the person saying, oh, I know the person who can do this project well. I will recommend that it be given to XYZ. Or it comes time, for someone to be promoted, they are actively working behind the scenes on your behalf, maybe talking to your own boss who may be their peer and say, wow, don't you think this person does a great job? And that way you are really creating the opportunities behind the scenes. So a sponsor is somebody who believes in you, who knows you have potential, and who is willing to step out and put their own reputation on the line for you to make sure that they open up doors for you that you may not even be aware of. A mentor is someone that, is like a confidant, to someone that you are free to share information with that you may not ordinarily share with others, who can take that information into confidence, who can honestly tell you how things are, give you feedback, good, bad, ugly, and able to, correct you, able to steer you in a certain direction. They are just there for you, to listen. So, and sometimes, it may be difficult to tell between the two, but either one is fine. At the end of the day, take advantage of whatever opportunities are, open up to you and do that. There are people who have reached out to me, through LinkedIn. They just see my profile and maybe like my career profile and say, okay, I want to get to know this person, and they've reached out directly, actually asking, can you be my mentor? And of course, why not? So if you find people like that, you consider a role model, don't be afraid, reach out to them. The worst they can tell you is, no, I can't do this, maybe I don't have the time, but that's okay. If you get a few no's, you are going to run into some few yeses, and take advantage of those yeses and run with it.
Yes, thank you so much for, making that distinction between a sponsor and a mentor. I know as I was matriculating through the fellowship, that was something that was really emphasized, was the importance of having someone to help develop you both professionally and personally, so you can reach the goals that you have set aside for yourself. I also wanted to get your perspective as a mentor. How can mentees help you, as that is, it should be a win-win
Yep,
relationship.
absolutely. Yeah, a mentoring relationship should, in fact, be a win-win relationship. Now, a mentee should know that their mentor is investing in them, right? And the least thing that the mentee can do is convey to that mentor in many different ways that they value their time, they appreciate what they are doing for them. And how can you do that? It's a simple, if you schedule an appointment that you are going to meet at a certain time, yeah, we all know we don't live in a perfect world. Something could come that may derail that appointment. Have the courtesy to reach out to this person and explain to them, either ahead of time, if something came up before the meeting, to say, oh, I would like for us to reschedule this meeting because something else came for me. Or if it is something that happened just right about the time you have to start the meeting, still take the time to send something to them, whether it's a text message, an email, a phone call, and let them know that this has come up and I can't make it. It's better to do that than sort of let the person call into, a meeting that you have, wait there for 15 minutes, you don't show up, they don't hear anything from you. It just sends the wrong message to that person that, well, you really don't appreciate this or value, that I'm taking time out of something else to invest in you. So make sure that you keep your appointments. When not possible to keep them, give advance notice and reschedule. Make sure that you follow up appropriately on any conversations that you all had. Sometimes it may be your mentor has told you to follow up on something. Go and do XYZ, or go and find, ABC information. Make sure that you do that. If you agree that you are going to do that, make sure that you do that, and make sure that there is that follow up to let the person know, yep, the guidance you provided to me. It could be like maybe they talked to you about you having a particular meeting with your manager and they gave you advice, they gave you guidance. It's important that after that meeting with that manager, you go back to your mentor, whether at your next regularly scheduled meeting or through an email, to let them know, yep, I did have that meeting. It went well, or it didn't go so well. Here were, the things that went well. These are the things that didn't go well. That then allows the mentor to be able to know how to tweak, the next conversation with you. But having that two-way communication is extremely important. And, like we say, it's a two-way thing. I think mentors also benefit from the mentoring relationship, because they can also see that, when they see advice or guidance they provided to someone that has made a difference in their life, it comes back to them as some type of an accomplishment, something that they find gratifying, that, okay, I've been able to do something that has made a difference in somebody else's life. Because anyone who wants to be a mentor is someone who is willing to make a difference in the life of another person. So, both individuals derive benefit, and mentors also learn things from the mentees, that can be helpful to them as well. I mean, sometimes I joke with my mentees and say, well, you need to be my mentor. I have this situation. What will you do? if you were in this situation. And guess what? You can always learn something from anyone. They don't have to be a vice president or, some other senior leader. Someone who is even at an entry level can provide advice that you might never have thought about. So yeah, both parties can enjoy it, but at the end of the day, it boils down to mutual respect, for each other. And if you do that, I think things will go really, really well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that response. And I wholeheartedly agree with everything. I believe that it should be a mutually benefiting relationship for it to thrive and evolve and stand the test of time. So now we've reached the last aspect of this conversation, and this should be a more casual and fun, interactive a game. It's called Rapid Fire This or That. So I'm going to give you two options and you have to pick one,
Oh
based off
my.
of your preferences. Are
Okay.
you
All
ready?
right. I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Nigerian jollof or Ghanaian jollof?
Oh, Nigerian, hands down.
Okay. Good answer. American football or soccer?
Soccer for sure.
Okay. Who's your favorite team?
For soccer, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, for soccer, it's always the Nigerian Eagles when they play. That's always my the team that I would cheer for. But if they don't win like the African Cup of Nations or in a FIFA game, then of course I will support other African countries. Those will be my next line of support, and then others.
Okay. And with the Super Bowl coming up this weekend, who are you
Yeah.
rooting for?
Oh my goodness, that's a tough one because I like both teams. I like Tom Brady because he's someone that shows really excellence in what they do, and I like the Kansas City Chiefs because you have a young quarterback, who just won their first Super Bowl last year. Their coach used to be the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, so I have some attachment to him as well. So, because Tom Brady has won what, maybe about five or six championships already. His fingers are already full of rings. He has no more space for rings. So I think I want Kansas City to have one more added to their plate. But whoever wins, I think I win because I love both teams.
That's a good answer. You can't lose. You're always going to be
Yeah,
a
I can't lose.
winner. The next one is city living or country living.
I think I've always enjoyed more country living. So I maybe because I grew up in a village, I don't know, but I love cities, but only to go in and come out as quickly as I can, go and do what I need and get out of it. But
Hmm.
I always live like in the suburbs because it's more quiet, and it could be because I've had to raise a family and I feel it's more quiet to do that, in the suburb than in the city. But I love the cities. I really love to visit, to get to do things there, but to live there, day in, day out. I've never really done that per se. And so, except, well, when I was in Nigeria, I did stay in some cities, Kaduna, Zaria, but at the end of the day, I think my preference is for the suburbs. Yeah, small
Okay.
towns. Yeah.
Netflix or cable TV?
Ah, so it may surprise you that I actually don't have an account for Netflix. My kids do. My kids do. So, but cable, I use cable, and I have the Netflix. So if there is something I want to watch, I mean, Wanda, you remember this? I think when we were together, and this
Black Panther?
the Black Panther. There you
Yep.
go. I was telling you that I haven't watched it, and you were sort of shocked and surprised. So what happened was shortly after that, I actually took an international trip, and the Black Panther was, one of the options I had to choose from. So I was able to watch it, actually twice on that trip. But ordinarily, I don't do too much, movies, unless somebody tells me there's some new movie that really looks great, you have to watch this, then I, force myself to do that. So I don't have a Netflix account, but like I said, my kids all have it. So if I need it, I know it's there, but it's just not what I do routinely.
That's okay. Most people just use other people's Netflix accounts, so it's all good. Yeah. So this is the final question.
Okay.
Beach vacation or city vacation?
So yeah, I do love the city vacation, and our favorite vacation city is actually Toronto in Canada. My entire family loves to go to Toronto, so every few years we try to plan a trip to go there. Then the last time we went to Canada, we actually went to all the major cities. We started from up north in Quebec, and then made our way to Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and then came to Niagara Falls. So yeah, I tend to enjoy, like I said, I love being in the cities. I just don't routinely live there permanently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's all of the questions that I have. Thank you, Dr. Ekuta, for your time, your pearls of wisdom, and being a remarkable mentor to me. I appreciate the time that you invested into my career, and I'm sure the mentees that you have across the US and I'm sure globally, they would say the same thing, that you are an incredible wealth of knowledge, and everything that you do and will do in the future will really make a difference in the world.
Thank you, Wanda. I appreciate all the kind words. It's really just having the opportunity to be where I am. I think it has given me a lot of opportunities to also make a difference in the lives of others. And I see it as a privilege. And certainly if I don't use that privilege, my belief always is that, you will be bypassed. Somebody else will use that. Somebody else is going to make a difference in another person's life. So why can't it be me doing that? So thank you for the honor, for the privilege. I'm really delighted to have been a part of this conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This week's episode was amazing, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Special thanks to our guest and my mentor, Dr. Jethro Ekuta, for joining us. If you haven't already, please show this podcast some love by leaving a review, sharing with your friends, and hitting subscribe today. If you would like to reach out to me, follow me on Instagram at JustWinWithWanda. Catch you on the next episode. Bye.